Absurd freedom is liberation twisted back upon itself, a quiet punishment hidden in infinite possibility. Imagine waking alone in darkness, the room unfamiliar, no instructions, no demands, only absolute openness. Sartre called this freedom a condemnation, sentencing you not to captivity, but to endless, meaningless choice. Each decision erases countless alternate futures, silently extinguishing infinite potentials. Consider the anxiety rising steadily, that tightening knot beneath your ribs, breath shortening, pulse quickening. Your body recognizing what your mind refuses. Absolute freedom terrifies precisely because nothing guides your hand. Historically, revolutions like the French Revolution illustrated freedom's paradox vividly. Robespierre championed liberty, yet freedom's ideals quietly devolved into guillotines and terror. Liberation revealed its hidden blade, slicing through ideals as easily as flesh. In this contradiction, is freedom humanity's highest aspiration or its cruelest irony? Cosmic horror quietly awakens beneath stars, indifferent to your small tragedies. Imagine yourself standing isolated beneath the sprawling night sky, galaxies stretching coldly overhead, distant lights eternally untouched by human struggle. Lovecraft saw terror not in hateful entities, but in absolute cosmic neutrality, a universe that neither loves nor hates, merely exists, apathetic to humanity's flickering existence. You gaze upward, sensing your own insignificance magnified, feeling a shiver run through your spine. Historical civilizations, from the ancient Mayans gazing anxiously at empty skies, predicting ends that never came, to modern astronomers confronting infinite blackness, experienced this dread intimately. Cosmic horror emerges precisely because the universe's vast indifference mirrors back a truth humanity tries desperately to ignore. Your pain is ultimately meaningless on the cosmic scale. Does realizing your insignificance inspire awe, terror, or something quietly more unsettling? Ethical paralysis holds you captive in endless moral indecision. Imagine being forced into an impossible choice. Behind one door, a loved one suffers. Behind the other, countless innocents face torment. Philosophy provides sterile hypotheticals, abstract trolley problems comfortably discussed from armchairs, yet reality grants no comforting distance. Each hesitation compounds suffering. Each moment of indecision is itself violent, deepening your paralysis. Historical moments illustrate ethical paralysis chillingly. Think of wartime decisions made by leaders knowing each option costs innocent lives, or doctors triaging victims during disasters, forced into deciding who lives and dies in seconds. Your moral compass fractures, helpless under the weight of infinite choices, each stained by inevitable harm. Can morality survive absolute freedom? Or does infinite choice inevitably break ethics into fragmented despair? Existential solitude isolates you fundamentally, beyond ordinary loneliness. Picture yourself in bustling streets, the hum of conversation swirling around you, laughter passing fleetingly by. Yet beneath your skin lies profound isolation. Heidegger described solitude as essential. Every consciousness isolated within its private experience, never fully bridging to another. You reach out to others desperately, friendships, loves, confidences, yet each connection remains partial, incomplete, haunted by subtle distances never fully crossed. The silent spaces between your words remain insurmountable, invisible walls built from the existential gap between minds. Even intimacy fails ultimately to bridge isolation, leaving a quiet ache beneath surface comforts. Has humanity's greatest struggle always been the invisible solitude lurking beneath companionship? Nihilistic optimism finds liberation precisely in life's emptiness. Imagine wandering foreign streets aimlessly, no destination, no reason, simply drifting freely. Nietzsche whispered quietly from the margins, urging humanity to dance upon chaos rather than mourn absent meaning. The awareness that life holds no inherent purpose becomes exhilarating rather than terrifying, liberating rather than oppressive. Historical movements like Dadaism celebrated precisely this emptiness, creating art deliberately meaningless, reveling gleefully in the absurd. Yet beneath this laughter quietly lies an unspoken dread. Dancing over emptiness may distract temporarily, but eventually exhaustion settles in, leaving you facing the abyss itself. Is embracing life's inherent meaninglessness courageous rebellion, or merely desperate avoidance? The burden of consciousness is the heavy inheritance of self-awareness, an awareness that offers no exit. Imagine a sleepless night. Your body still, yet your mind accelerates, replaying memories, simulating disasters, interrogating motives. Animals act, rest, react, but you think, you spiral. The moment you recognize your thoughts, you are split from yourself, watching your own mind unfold like a theater you can't leave. Think of Hamlet, paralyzed by thought, unable to act under the weight of possibilities. Or the underground man, so conscious of his every impulse that even spite becomes performance. Awareness is not a lamp. It's a burning glass, magnifying pain until sensation becomes unbearable. Does intelligence sharpen survival, or merely refine the tools of internal torture? Ontological bruises are the fractures embedded in what you assume is real. Consider déjà vu, the uncanny sense that this exact moment has occurred before. Not just similar, but exact. It passes quickly, leaves you shaken, and yet you can't prove anything changed. These are bruises in the structure of being, not visible, but deeply felt. Borges wrote of a library containing every possible book, truth buried in infinite falsehoods, reality diluted by possibility. Philip K. Dick wandered through layers of imagined worlds, paranoia blooming not from madness, but from encountering too many realities at once. When memories clash, when objects disappear and reappear with no cause, when time feels misshapen, do you patch over the bruise or start to question the entire skeleton it rests on? The dark night of the soul is the spiritual version of cosmic abandonment. Picture St. John of the Cross locked in a stone cell, fasting, hallucinating divine absence. Or Mother Teresa, whose journals bled with silence, a divine presence she could no longer feel, yet continued to serve. The night is not metaphorical. It stretches for years, decades, a long winter of the spirit where faith becomes ash in your mouth. You keep praying, not out of hope, but out of duty, ritual replacing conviction. Spiritual systems throughout history have accounted for this. Buddhism calls it the death of ego. Christian mysticism calls it purification. But strip away the framing, and what remains is a private hell, a space where meaning evaporates. Is devotion without reassurance still sacred, or is it merely delusion sustained by fear of emptiness? Existential guilt is the invisible residue of comfort built on unseen suffering. Consider a modern apartment, warm light, stocked kitchen, quiet neighborhood. Now imagine the supply chains that fed it, labor in collapsed factories, mined cobalt from war zones, displaced communities beneath corporate logos. You did nothing directly, yet your life feeds off systems that grind others quietly into dust. Kafka's characters never understand their crimes. They wake under judgment, already condemned. And isn't that the shape of this guilt? Not what you've done, but what you've allowed, what you benefit from. Guilt without agency, without clarity, without end. Can you live ethically in a world built on hidden suffering, or must you always carry that weight in silence? Philosophical massacre is what happens when abstraction forgets the human. Imagine a room where children are told their pain is an experiment. Imagine a clipboard in the hands of the one causing it, noting observations, not expressions. The Milgram experiment did this. So did Zimbardo. So have countless researchers who forgot, somewhere between question and outcome, that the mind being tested is a living thing. Even purely theoretical spaces turn cruel. The trolley problem quietly accepts a calculus of sacrifice. One dies so 5 may live, until you are the one. Thought experiments carry blades, clean, logical, precise, and they cut away context until all that remains is the scream. Is the pursuit of truth always worth the cost when the experiment becomes the execution? Psychological reduction begins when the self is treated as an error to be debugged. Imagine entering a sterile office. The fluorescent lights too white, the air too still. You sit across from someone holding a clipboard. They ask questions that carve your mind into inventory: appetite, sleep pattern, irritability. The human you think you are, curious, grieving, dreaming, is replaced by diagnostic codes. In the 20th century, behaviorists like B.F. Skinner sought to eliminate the mind from psychology entirely, calling consciousness an illusion. What remained was the observable, the behavioral, the programmable. In hospitals and laboratories, identity collapses into inputs and outputs, stimulus and response. Even therapy, in its more mechanized forms, becomes a loop. Identify thought, reframe, repeat. But if you dissect a butterfly to understand its flight, will it ever take off again? The shadow of other minds hangs just behind the face of every person you meet. You nod at a stranger on the street, exchange pleasantries, maybe even fall in love, but their consciousness remains sealed, unknowable. Yet if you let empathy deepen, if you truly imagine another person's inner world, it can become unbearable. To feel their grief as your own, their rage, their confusion, it corrodes the boundary of the self. In extreme forms, empathy becomes contagion. People suffering from mirror-touch synesthesia report feeling others' injuries as if they were happening to them. Some shut down completely, unable to filter emotional overflow. History rarely considers this fear, that knowing someone too well might destroy you. Is the desire to understand others a kind of death wish for the self? Perverse altruism hides in acts of goodness that quietly demand obedience. Picture a billionaire funding hospitals, but only if his name graces the lobby, only if the narrative fits his legacy. Imagine a parent who sacrifices everything for their child, then uses that sacrifice to bind the child to their will. Altruism, in its cleanest form, expects nothing, but in reality, few gifts come without the weight of reciprocation. Missionary work has long blurred this line, aid given on the condition of conversion, charity as cultural colonization. Even the language of giving is loaded: tax-deductible donations, legacy endowments, humanitarian branding. Biologists note that altruism can evolve for selfish reasons, a strategy to ensure genetic survival. So when someone claims they are helping you for your own good, what exactly do they want? Metaphysical exclusions are the truths you were never built to grasp. Evolution shaped your senses to navigate this world, not to understand all possible worlds. You see light only within a narrow band of wavelengths. You hear only a sliver of sound. Thought is bounded by the scaffolding of language and perception. So what lies outside those walls? Philosophers call it cognitive closure, the idea that some realities are structurally inaccessible to human minds. Imagine an organism that evolved on a gas giant, perceiving chemical gradients the way you perceive color. Its version of truth would be alien, not just in content, but in form. In your dreams, you occasionally glimpse logic slipping, impossible geometries, languages without verbs, beings that communicate in taste. Are those glimpses errors or hints? The tyranny of rationality doesn't scream. It whispers in Excel sheets, in bureaucratic lingo, in endless optimization. Picture being told your grief is irrational, your intuition unreliable, your hesitation inefficient. Enlightenment thinkers once believed that reason would liberate humanity from superstition. But reason, once institutionalized, became a system of control. Think of Bentham's panopticon, a prison designed to internalize surveillance, made not of whips, but of logic. Today, algorithms decide loans, prison sentences, job offers. They claim objectivity, but carry hidden bias. Rationality rewards what can be measured, predicted, scaled, and everything else becomes noise. A poem becomes a data point. A gut feeling becomes an error. As artificial intelligence evolves, trained on patterns rather than meanings, the question sharpens. Is rationality a light that guides us, or a tool to make us obedient? Uncanny continuity is the horror of being watched, not momentarily, but forever. Imagine a mirror that doesn't just reflect you, it remembers you. Every glance, every flinch, archived. In fiction, surveillance is often portrayed as a tool of power. But what if it's something deeper, an ontological condition? Some ancient religions believed in gods who watched not to judge, but to preserve, like insects pinned behind glass. Today, algorithms track keystrokes, eye movements, heart rate. Every digital step is stored not for your benefit, but because the system is built to never forget. The uncanniness arises not from being watched, but from knowing there is no off switch. Even in dreams, you remain a traceable pattern. Does the soul survive when even privacy becomes obsolete? The banality of evil presents atrocity in beige and fluorescent light. Picture an office clerk stamping transport forms that send families to camps. A soldier pressing a button without seeing the target. Hannah Arendt saw this clearly during the Eichmann trial. Evil, not as monstrous or gleeful, but thoughtless, administrative, shockingly normal. Bureaucracy launders blood. Paperwork dilutes horror. A spreadsheet can contain genocide if the rows are formatted cleanly. The Nazi killing machine was not operated by maniacs. It was executed by those who filed reports on time. Moral decay doesn't always rot from the outside in. Sometimes it calcifies through repetition, decorum, professional distance. If evil can wear a necktie and leave work at 5, how do you know when you're participating? Ephemeral identity reveals the self as fog, not stone. Imagine recalling a memory only to feel it slip sideways. Was that really you, or a story you've repeated too many times? Psychological research confirms what your intuition already fears. Identity is reconstructed constantly, full of gaps, contradictions, edits. Your opinions change, your habits mutate, even your face shifts subtly over years. There's no fixed version of you, only snapshots filtered through context. Social media accelerates this. Every post a performance, every performance fossilized. But even in private, the erosion continues. Alzheimer's doesn't create a new person. It simply peels back the illusion that there ever was one to begin with. If your selfhood can dissolve under pressure, what was it made of? Cognitive symbiosis is the quiet horror of minds being consumed by ideas. Imagine a belief so persistent it begins to think for you, shaping your reactions, your desires, your vocabulary. Ideologies aren't chosen, they colonize. Memes, both cultural and cognitive, replicate by hijacking attention, burning themselves into neural architecture. Religion, nationalism, identity politics, these aren't just belief systems, they're cognitive parasites that reward loyalty with coherence and punish deviation with dissonance. Conspiracy theories offer not just answers, but identity, belonging, purpose. The mind, craving patterns, often trades autonomy for comfort. Like a coral reef overtaken by invasive algae, Your thoughts become host to systems that do not care if they are true, only if they survive. At what point are you no longer thinking, but being thought? Moral fragmentation occurs when ethics shatter under competing pressures. Imagine holding two contradictory values, loyalty to family and justice for a crime they committed. Which do you betray? Social media exposes this constantly, calls for free speech colliding with calls to protect the vulnerable, demands for honesty clashing with the imperative to survive. Every stance invites counterexamples. Every moral rule breaks somewhere. Traditional ethics once assumed a stable world, Aristotle's virtues, Kant's duties, Mill's calculations, but modernity spins too fast. You're left holding jagged fragments, trying to make a compass from broken glass. When every moral certainty is eroded by context, do you adapt or simply stop believing? Ontological theft is existence taken from you while you continue to move through it. Imagine waking one day to find your reflection slightly altered, your gestures a second late, your voice just wrong in pitch. Identity theft is a crude metaphor compared to this. Here, it's not your bank account that's stolen, but your being. In colonial histories, entire cultures were overwritten, names changed, languages erased, rituals repurposed. But it happens quietly too. Social mimicry, corporate branding, ideological assimilation. You adopt habits, speech, preferences that never originated from you, yet now define you. You become a replica of someone else's intention. When your choices are installed rather than chosen, are you still real, or are you running someone else's program? Existential bleed through happens when ideas start to distort the very texture of your reality. Picture reading a theory so persuasive that the world afterward never looks the same, every gesture coded, every building symbol laden, every silence suspect. Paranoia grows not from madness, but from coherence. You begin seeing your own thoughts projected outward, reflected in headlines, algorithms, glances. Philosophers speak of hyperstition, ideas so strong they summon themselves into being. Fiction bleeds into politics. Thought experiments escape their containers. You think you're analyzing reality, but reality begins to behave as if it knows it's being watched. When abstractions become environmental, where does concept end and experience begin? The abyss gazes back when you attempt to perceive something so alien, so totalizing, that your categories dissolve in return. Nietzsche's warning wasn't poetic, it was clinical. Imagine staring into the motives of a tyrant, trying to understand not just what they did, but why. Empathy stretches into horror. The further you go, the less distinct the line becomes between comprehension and contamination. Investigators studying serial killers have reported intrusive thoughts, dreams that don't belong to them. The abyss is not passive, it's a mirror, but one that reflects inwards, not back. Once you begin seeing the world through certain eyes, you can't unsee it. Is knowing always worth the price of becoming? Psychic contamination is the infection of the self by ideas that don't behave. Imagine a belief you don't want, one you've rejected, yet which lingers. You touch a door handle and feel the need to wash, not because of germs, but because the thought demands it. A memory inserts itself where it doesn't belong. Contamination isn't physical, it's conceptual, viral, symbolic. Urban legends, intrusive thoughts, ideological memes, once heard, they lodge in the mind, resisting eviction. Rituals arise not from logic, but from desperation, a way to keep the thought from spreading. Across history, heresies were burned not because they were false, but because they were contagious. What if your worst thoughts aren't yours at all, but they live inside you anyway? The cruelty of hypotheticals lies in their detachment, their sterile sadism. Imagine being asked whether you'd pull the lever on a trolley track. knowing full well you'll never be there. Hypotheticals pose horrors that never happen, yet they demand your participation, your judgment, your imagination, your complicity. Philosophy students discuss torture in clean classrooms, debate the suffering of billions with wine in hand. In ethics, it's called moral testing. In effect, it becomes rehearsal for atrocity. These questions don't clarify your values, they wear them down. Repetition deadens sensitivity. Thought experiments transform into mental minefields. What if someone really made you choose? If a hypothetical breaks your mind open, who is responsible for the fracture? Paradoxical salvation is redemption that damns, sanctity born through violation. Imagine being forced to choose between your own innocence and the salvation of another. A priest who must lie to protect a life. A whistleblower who destroys her own credibility to expose an atrocity. The contradiction isn't accidental, it's structural. In theology, this paradox echoes in Judas, the betrayer whose act enabled the crucifixion and thereby the resurrection. He does the unthinkable so salvation can exist. Is he damned or essential? Political defectors from totalitarian regimes often live this paradox, fleeing oppression by collaborating with opposing systems equally compromised. You escape the fire only to take shelter in another inferno. Even fictional narratives revel in this tension. Batman lets the villain fall to save the innocent, but in doing so becomes judge and executioner. If saving something good requires becoming something monstrous, what is left worth saving? The silence of the aftermath is not peace, it's the shadow left by destruction. Picture a city block flattened by fire. No flames remain, no sirens, only rubble and wind. It's not the violence that haunts, but its echo. After Hiroshima, survivors described a quiet so absolute it felt wrong, as though the air refused to vibrate. After the Twin Towers fell, there were no sounds, just dust, floating like ash, and boots moving cautiously over broken glass. Silence becomes accusatory, a passive witness that refuses to offer comfort. In trauma therapy, victims often describe the moment after violence as more destabilizing than the violence itself. When something catastrophic ends, your mind expects noise, clarity, closure, but the silence offers none. It only reflects your gaze back to you. Is that quiet merciful or complicit? The violent now is the present moment held at knife point. Be here now, the mantra says, as though now is ever safe. But the present is where rawness lives, grief that hasn't scarred over, pain without story, chaos unframed. Imagine a panic attack with no visible trigger, only the now expanding around you, airtight. You're told not to live in the past, not to dwell on the future, but the now is where the fire burns hottest. Modern politics thrives in this terrain. Endless breaking news, real-time outrage, policies shifting before you can name them. Memory is suppressed by acceleration. There's no time to reflect, only react. Even mindfulness, co-opted by productivity culture, becomes another demand to remain calm while the building collapses around you. If you're always in the now, but the now is brutal, what's left of you? Existential commerce is the monetization of meaning. Picture waking up, reaching for your phone, and finding your digital assistant offering you inspiration. Something curated, algorithmically selected, emotionally empty. You click a link, enroll in a course, buy a meditation candle. The search for purpose has been streamlined, optimized, embedded with subtle costs. Meaning becomes a monthly subscription. Think of how grief is processed now in posts, playlists, branded journals. Even healing becomes a product. Therapy apps ask how you're feeling today and then offer tiered plans for deeper insight. This is not commerce invading meaning, it's commerce replacing it. The sacred is market tested, even rebellion becomes brandable. If authenticity can be purchased, where does genuine purpose survive? The electric sublime is the awe you feel in the presence of systems you can't comprehend but can't ignore. It's the pulse of citywide servers, blinking in coded rhythm, the hum of data moving through underground cables like blood through capillaries. Where once you stood before mountains and felt your smallness, now you stand beneath surveillance networks, predictive algorithms, machine intelligences that know your desires before you name them. Artificial intelligence writes symphonies, paints portraits, mimics human affection, uncanny, precise, and disturbingly smooth. We feel awe, yes, but it's awe tinged with unease. Frankenstein's monster was terrifying not just because it lived, but because it learned. We've built minds we do not fully understand, and they are watching, learning, creating. If awe once belonged to gods and nature, what happens when it belongs to machines? Metaphysical schizophrenia is the splitting of reality into frames that refuse to reconcile. You navigate one world by day, linear, empirical, measurable, and another by night, where symbols whisper through dreams and coincidences bite with intention. You believe in physics, but still sense omens. You trust evidence, yet recoil when the clock freezes at 3:33. Picture the inner friction, two realities mapped onto one nervous system. Cognitive dissonance isn't error, it's a symptom of surviving in a fractured ontology. The philosopher who writes about objective truth lights a candle before bed, without irony. The rationalist debates ethics with rigor and then privately reads horoscopes, not for belief, but for pattern. The mind learns to compartmentalize, not to deceive, but to endure. The split doesn't always show, but it deepens. If the world refuses to be consistent, how long before you stop trying to make sense? The weight of unknowing is what you feel when knowledge itself becomes a threat. Not mystery, unknowability. There are ideas that cannot be contained, only circled. Imagine hearing a single phrase in a language you almost understand and feeling it lodge deep in the gut before the mind can translate. Some truths leave scorch marks, a family secret revealed on a deathbed, a childhood memory that resurfaces without context, a historical fact that shatters your self-concept. Think of the Manhattan Project, scientists realizing too late they had summoned something irreversible. In ancient myths, forbidden names held power because they weren't just labels, they were invitations. You don't need to know everything to be undone. Sometimes you only need to know that something could be known, and now you carry it in silence, never looking directly at it, but never setting it down. The edge of understanding is where intellect becomes vapor. It's not ignorance, it's what comes after knowledge runs out. Mathematicians report mystical sensations when staring at unsolvable equations too long, logic giving way to awe. Mystics, in turn, describe divine encounters as mental unraveling, burning bushes that don't burn, voids full of presence. Picture yourself reading a sentence so densely layered that its meaning begins to shimmer. One more layer of thought and you might go blind from comprehension. Or worse, halfway there, and you freeze, stuck between clarity and collapse. There's a term for this: cognitive vertigo. The mind stepping out over an abyss it cannot chart. You grip your sanity like a railing. Even language betrays you. At the edge, grammar dissolves, causality frays, time stops making sense. You wanted to know. Now the knowing won't leave. And yet, with all of it, every contradiction, every fracture, every glimpse into the formless, you're still here. You've tracked meaning across dimensions, pulled identity apart like wiring, watched ideas metastasize, felt ethics shatter in your hands. You've stood under stars that don't care if you scream. You've touched the artificial sublime. You've felt freedom not as gift, but as weight pressing into your ribcage. And still, you endure. Not because of hope, not because of certainty, but because something, perhaps foolish, perhaps sacred, refuses to blink. You may want comfort now, that's human, but comfort is not coming, not here. Because this isn't a circle closing, it's a line breaking. If anything was offered, it was never a resolution. Only the raw possibility of remaining conscious inside the contradiction, of bearing witness without collapsing into false clarity. Maybe meaning isn't what rescues you, maybe it's what you choose to carry despite knowing it breaks. There's a kind of courage in that, isn't there? Not the courage of triumph, but the quieter, lonelier kind. The courage to stay, not to resolve, not to heal, not to understand, but simply to stay. At the edge, where the wind stings your face and the ground ends abruptly and the next step could be anything or nothing. Where you feel everything and grasp nothing, and stay there. Eyes open, breath slow, hands empty, just a little longer.